Hi, I'm Maria Mindlin, and I'm a linguist and a plain language editor. And I've been working on a video project with Anna Heinlein of Law New York and Mary Zimmerman of Idaho Legal Aid. This project was funded by an LSC TIG grant, and this same grant has funded other plain language and readability tools that you can find at writeclearly.org. I'd like to tell you a little bit about my background. I work at Transcend, and Transcend is a small company. It's been around for 25 years. And at this time, we specialize in plain language and plain translation. But it wasn't always so. We started off as a certified translation agency, and we found ourselves translating extremely complex legal documents into other languages. So in other words, we were creating extremely complex translated documents that were as hard and difficult to understand as the original English. We were lucky enough to benefit from a window of time that here in California, the Judicial Council decided that they wanted to have their domestic violence forms to be so usable and so readable that anyone on her own, on his own, would be able to fill out the forms that you needed for a domestic violence restraining order and to be able to present that at court, to file it at court. So that was a wonderful opportunity for us, California being the first state in the nation that brought plain language forms to court. I was the lead author on the first, and believe it or not, only quantitative test of comparative readability, looking at how plain language court forms do in comparison to the traditional court forms. And that article appears in Scribes of 2005, and it talks about the testing methodology. So if you're interested, you can go ahead and find it there. In the past 20 years, I've been involved with drafting and testing plain English and plain translated documents for different state courts and legal services agencies. And it's been wonderful to see it spread, starting with the California courts to so many other states, and to see so many other states just jump way ahead. It's really been very gratifying. Some of my other experience, I worked under Professor Richard Wydick, who you probably all know is the author of Plain English for Lawyers, and definitely the plain English guru in the United States. And he's a professor emeritus of UC Davis Law School, which is the Martin Luther King Law School. And it was really wonderful to be able to be with third-year students and send them off trying to think about being a little plain, at least sometimes. And I edited Brian Garner's Red Book text on visual accessibility. If you've done some of our other courses on readability or plain language, you know it's not just language, that there's also other things involved. So this is how it looks and how that affects whether or not you're going to read it. So the reason I'm doing this particular video presentation today is I was asked to present something on the importance of plain language. And after thinking about that a bit and trying to think, well, what does that really mean? Because I think most people in our field would say, oh, absolutely, we definitely want people to be able to understand the information that we're giving them. So maybe what the question might be is it worth the effort to use plain language and to use readability techniques? Like anything else, when you start doing things in a different way, it's a change. Change is hard. You have to invest some time to be able to learn how to do this, to become more proficient at it. So is it really worth it? So I guess you probably all know what I'm going to say. Yes, it is worth it. If you really want as many people as possible to be able to read and understand the legal information that you're giving them, it is worth the effort. So the other side of this would be to ask if we gain anything, if there's any benefit from continuing to create materials in the way that we have in the past. There's enough data out there that we can say that we know most people don't understand the fairly dense, complex information that we've typically provided in the past. Is there any benefit from continuing to provide this style of information? So data-driven communication choices, strategies, options. I mean, clearly data-driven is just the new catchwords, I think, in terms of so many approaches in different industries. And do we, as providers of information, of legal information, have something to learn from this data-driven approach? And in my opinion, I think we do. First of all, we know we are writing for a particular audience. Knowing that we're writing for an audience and understanding generally, sometimes very specifically, who that audience is, gives us these very rich opportunities to track how effective the information that we give them really is. And if we can say that the effectiveness could be evaluated by have they understood the most important points that I've wanted them to know about, to learn, to understand. When we start getting that type of feedback from our readers, we really start to be guided by our readers' preferences. We understand the way they respond to different information communication strategies. We understand more about their reading proficiency, about words that they don't understand easily, about words that they prefer. So in both very general and very specific ways, we start to learn what type of writing really works best with the audience that we're serving. Well, it's impossible to talk about audiences without talking about Orwell. He told us that we have to know our audience. We have to write for them and for them only. That we have to be concise. We have to use plain language, forget the jargon, forget the Latin, and we have to be very direct and very focused. So really, I think he's our leader, our teacher in this area. And if Orwell weren't enough, we have Hemingway. For those of you who use WordPerfect, you know that Hemingway is the standard for their readability tool. If you didn't, you may not have known that if you average out Hemingway's work and do a readability analysis on it, Hemingway writes at an average 6th grade level. He writes in a way that's so elegant and so spare. And this is a beautiful style of writing and clearly brings you in and is so effective. So it's so far away from what some people call dumbing down or, making it into something very silly. It's really making what you write very attractive and very readable and usable for your reader. I'm sure that you've already know about this, but just really quickly, one of the things that we're doing is we're writing at the 5th to 7th grade level. That's where the average English-speaking U.S. reader is at. We're short sentences, short words, short paragraphs, and we're also limiting the amount of words that we provide per page or in a particular section. So if this idea of being data-driven and really learning from your readers and changing your focus is attractive for you, then you might want to watch this series of 5 videos. And here's what you'll learn. And some of this you probably already know. You'll learn how to prepare your text, and that means making it plain, making it very readable. You'll learn how to prepare an instrument. And an instrument, of course, is what you use to get your feedback from your typical readers. You'll learn how to pre-test so that you can improve your instrument and your text. You'll learn how to recruit focus group participants, how to build your own focus group team, and how to actually do the test. And in the last one, you'll learn how to write your focus group report and make recommendations. And this last one is where we really have so much wonderful data about what our readers prefer and how they say things. On our end, we save and treasure these reports, and it's sort of my dream that we would all share the information that we get from our testing together so that we could learn more. I'd like to give you 2 very quick examples of the switch in perspective that you may get when you're writing things, when you're writing information or preparing tools for your readers. And we'll start off with this very dramatic example of something that was written by the U.S. Immigration Services. And the idea was to prepare the detainee for the hearing, and in particular, how to use the interpreter and what's going to happen in court. And for those of you that know a bit about readability and plain language and reading interest, you can predict that this document is unlikely to be read. If it does get read, not very much of it will be read, and it's at a fairly high grade level, so we're also not sure how much of it will be understood. And something like this, when you start learning more about the type of tools, for example, that a detainee would need before a hearing, gets translated to something like this. Graphics are increasingly important, and I'm sure you'll get a lot of feedback about that when you do your own focus group testing. They have also the wonderful benefit of conveying so much information for people who are illiterate or whose literacy levels are so low that they wouldn't be able to read something like this. So just this alone, looking at the little figures here, gives the detainee a sense of what he or she is going into. So it's really easy to see that we're moving away from this sort of big text block with lots of information to something very different and very focused. Let's go on to another example. This is actually pretty nice. It does a good job of using bold and highlighting the most important parts that people would need to understand and do if they were going to apply for residency in the United States. But as you know from readability, it has some problems. It's got a very high reading level, which is a mismatch for the average reader. It doesn't matter whether we're talking about immigrants. It would be anyone in the United States. And we know the reading interest starts off with a term that many people might not understand, or for instance, in focus group testing, people thought this might be about the legalization of marijuana. So it didn't really set the right stage, and it discouraged many of the readers from actually getting to this information that they needed to get. When we worked with the authors of this particular document, they shared with us that one of their goals was to give their readers a tool that would help them to understand very, very clearly what it was they needed to do to be ready to apply for residency. And as you can see, although this information is in there, it's in there in a way that's not really accessible for the average person. So let me show you how we handled this one. Again, we're looking at graphics. We're also looking at something that benefited from focus group testing. This is really quite different than what it was in the beginning. And it ended up using a lot of the style and words and graphic preferences that this particular group of readers had, including this very important warning here about notarios, which can be a real danger for people who are applying for residency in the United States. So that's what happens when you start testing and when you start getting feedback from people. You really get to have a new look at your materials, and you get the opportunity to ask yourself, why am I writing this? Really, what is the main point? Who am I writing it for? What are the most important things? What if I test for that and see if they really can understand those things? So that takes us back to our question. Is it worth the effort to learn how to do plain language and readability? Of course, I'm going to say yes. And it's yes if you want as many people as possible to read and understand the information that you provide. Yes, you should learn more about it. And I think that's the goal of what this 5-video series is about. We want you to learn how to test your own documents and how to be guided by the results that you get from the testing, so that your writing changes and your organization's writing changes in a way that really responds to your readers' needs. Thank you very much, and I hope that the video series is useful for you. And thanks again.